Before I introduce the contestants to my left, thanks so much for coming here this afternoon and engaging these issues of the future of work. I'm Philip Zellico. As Bridge mentioned, I've been involved with this Rework America project that has engaged CEOs and community leaders and people from both sides of the aisle. The America's Moment book is very broadly gauged. It's actually about what Senator Warner was referring to as the whole future of American capitalism agenda. So it discusses issues from capital and finance to education to labor markets to R&D, the whole gamut with a historical context. But this future of work focus in the labor market is really important. We've got a terrific panel here to start this off. In kind of introducing and setting the scene for this, it's worth keeping the history in mind. You remember that Secretary Perez mentioned that this may be Social Compact 2.0? Well, if we ask ourselves, what would be Social Compact 1.0? Actually, you couldn't get a better example of Social Compact 1.0 than the famous, to labor historians, Treaty of Detroit. The Treaty of Detroit was the great landmark deal struck by Walter Reuther's United Auto Workers with General Motors in 1950. It was the last of the big three to be broken to the wheel. And in the Treaty of Detroit of 1950, it secured for American workers at GM and basically the rest of American big business, think about it, health care benefits, unemployment compensation, paid vacation, pensions, even cost of living adjustments attached to their wages. Why did GM do this? Well, they had a business case for doing it. Think about it from GM's point. It's easy to think about it from Reuther's point of view. The GM argument was, we get three things. One, we get labor peace, which is important, which they hadn't had for 20 years. Two, we will run all these benefit systems instead of the federal government running it, and we would rather do it. Three, this is going to help us compete for talented workers in an incredibly tight American labor market of 1950. None of those three concerns dominate American business today. They created a system optimized for the world of 1950. Our job, in a way, is how to create the system that's optimized for the world of 2015, which is a very different world. Think about their approach to the future of work. In a way, it was a classic bundled approach. You know about bundling, like music. In the days of the record companies, what did iTunes do? It unbundled music. So they bundled work with all the benefits, all these other things in the large workplaces with big unions, etc. What's happening now, of course, in the digital age is we are unbundling work. You know what that feels like in the music world. And you know how exciting and liberating it can be in the music world and in the working world. But of course, also full of anxiety and insecurity. And the point that Senator Warner made in that terrific set of remarks was that we cannot force the American people to choose between opportunity and insecurity. We must provide them with both. In other words, we must conclude the Treaty of Detroit for the 21st century. And so to introduce this panel, I'll say, it is the job of this generation to sign that treaty. And it is the job of this Aspen program to try to draft it. Now, what we have here on the panel today is to introduce them from your left to your right, Byron Auguste. Byron leads Opportunity at Work. Byron's been doing things at the White House, with McKinsey before that. He knows the world of business and the world of government. And now what he's trying to do is take the big picture macro view and reform the whole system of America's labor markets. If you went to his website, Opportunity at Work, there's a three-part mantra on the front page of it that frankly should be gospel, about helping Americans find work based on ability, not sheepskins. He calls it pedigree. helping them find access to training, using opportunities to get access to training that have never been so available, and helping them use technology to link people to opportunity. We have Sheila Marcello. Sheila is from Care.com, and Care.com is one of the platforms that is revolutionizing the world of work. What Care.com does, it connects caregivers to people who need care. And in the same sense, Oshin Hanrahan, at the far end there, is also with another one of those platforms revolutionizing that world. He's with Handy. What Handy does is it connects independent service professionals in many kinds of field to people who need services in our services economy, transforming that world in all sorts of amazing ways. Saket Soni represents the National Guest Workers Alliance, which is entering the long-standing field of guest workers and trying to figure out how to, in other words, reinvent the whole world of employee power in ways to strike new kinds of bargains for a mobile and unstable and inherently unstable workforce. What I want to do then is, starting with Byron, is in a way ask you to kind of, because you folks are all on the front lines of this in different ways, is kind of basically say, one, explain to the audience why you think this is a big deal, briefly. And then the other thing is, explain to them where you see a misfit between the institutions of that Treaty of Detroit era and what we need for the 21st century. Byron, why don't you start?
Okay, great. Well, we're focused here today on portable benefits, and in my world of opportunity at work, and along with colleagues, Anne-Marie Slaughter, who I see here from New America, and many people in this room, we signed about a month ago a set of principles on common ground for independent workers, because we think that it's incredibly important that the basic benefits, the outcomes that the Treaty of Detroit, as you put it, was intended to fulfill, are fulfilled in some way in this new era, and that they're done in a way that's consistent with the kind of flexibility and the dynamism we see in this part of the labor market. So we think it's very important both for innovation and for worker protection, and I think the idea that these are in conflict just seems to us to be a tremendous mistake, because it's really almost an insult to American ingenuity and innovation and creativity and entrepreneurship to think that the only way to develop these new business models is by undermining protections or social insurance and the like. That's just not true. In fact, many of these new models create a tremendous amount of new efficiency, better matching, et cetera. The McKinsey Global Institute estimated that there was about $2.7 trillion of GDP, global GDP, that could be created by these online talent platforms in the next 15 years. So there's an enormous upside, and you don't need to have a race to the bottom in order to realize that upside. And in fact, I think a good litmus test is if differences in regulatory structure are driving business models in one direction or another, then we've got a problem. So the goal here is really to have a level playing field that's consistent with innovation. Now, I think this is important in its own right, because there are millions of people working already in this on-demand economy. But I also think it's important because it's really a warm-up for the big changes we're going to need to be able to make in our labor market institutions over the next few years. The employment from that 1950s or even from the 1970s, there's been an enormous change in the labor market, an enormous change in the way employers make employment decisions, and in a sense, over a lifetime, over a career, almost all of us are now independent workers, in the sense that we can't expect to be with the same employer over a lifetime, and so that social compact is not there. In our work at Opportunity at Work, we would say that today, the way the labor market works does not work for half of the workforce already today. That if anyone who's not taken sort of the straight path through 4-year reasonably selective college degree and through work, or doesn't have a diminishing set of very clear middle-skilled jobs anchored typically in a union contract. Anyone who's not in one of those paths is really kind of in trouble already. So if there's 40 million people who have gone to college but don't have a formal degree. There are millions of people who need to make transitions from one job to another. There are many workers in their 50s. 20 years ago, those who transitioned work in their 40s, on average, raised their income, right? Today, those who transition work in their 40s, on average, see their income diminished. That is a very big change, and it's rooted in very different norms around employer hiring, training, and firing, right? Including recessions where people are laid off across the board rather than held on to as much as they can. So given how fundamental these changes are, we're going to be needing to change a lot more than our rules about the gig economy, but really the rules about the whole thing. And I think one thread I'd like to emphasize in this discussion is that it's not only protection against the downside that is missing in this on-demand economy, the way the rules work right now. You're also not allowed to train people in this workforce today, because if you train them, then by definition, they're going to be an employee. So if you're debating whether this is an employee or whether it's an independent contractor, you can't provide training. And I think that's a fundamental problem, and it's a very deep problem, because as we think about all of the things that get most undermined by the volatility and sort of the dynamism and people moving jobs, training and human capital development is one of the most profound, because if you believe that you're only going to be working with an employee for a short period of time, then the investment in that person's skills you're not going to see that as your highest priority. And I think we've seen that. There's probably been a 30% decline in per worker training in real terms at the bottom third of the labor market. That's been much more severe, and the extreme version of it is in this on-demand economy. So I think, and when you dig a little further into that, what you find, to your point about why is this so very important, you find that is also the key, most likely, not only to our next generation social contract, but our next generation economic growth model in this country. If you look at where are the productive assets that we can redeploy, we talk about the sort of you've got all these empty rooms, and Airbnb allows you to monetize them, and that's phenomenal. But guess what? We've got massive underemployment and people's talents going to waste. That is orders of magnitude a bigger economic issue. And in fact, if you compare, best we can measure, the value of the human capital stock in this country, it's about $150 trillion to $200 trillion, which is about 4 to 5 times as much as the invested capital, corporate capital in this country. And when you consider that the entire S&P 500, private equity industry, all the consultants, investment bankers, accountants, lawyers, et cetera, who work on the behalf of those institutions, have been turning the crank for 30 years on optimizing return on invested capital, while we've been letting this source of productive capacity, productive potential that's 5 times bigger, we've essentially been ignoring it, and no institutions are truly optimizing it. The individual has the incentive, but doesn't have the information, doesn't have the institutional support. So if you start to pull on this thread of portable benefits, of portable training, you start to see that you've got a much bigger challenge. And I think one of the most attractive things about the discussion we're having here is that we're not entrenched. We don't have a large set of vested interests already with absolutely predetermined positions in this on-demand economy, so we can approach it with a set of principles and work our way back from there. How do we want our institutions to work? And what I think we should all aim to do is to build on that discussion to then go deeper and broader into our overall labor market and say what kind of social compact do we need for the whole economy and the entire labor market going forward.
So Sheila, bring us into the world of platforms and caregivers.
Absolutely. So on any two sides of a platform, there's demand and supply. And the whole point of portability is because there's a value that we have on flexibility. So let me talk about flexibility first on sort of the demand side. When we think about what's happening in the demographics, right? Women, 50% of the workforce, 40% are primary breadwinners. 70% are now dual income families. of all people working. 50% have a responsibility on a dependent. So care is a key issue for many workers. And when we poll McKinsey studies, so many studies have put it out there, that millennials care deeply about flexibility. So we are a nation of caregivers. We have a responsibility overall, but yet we have an anachronistic system of a single income household in the way that we have benefits and the things that support this demand. So now let's talk about in a marketplace, a platform, you have the flexibility of the supply side. The original gig worker has actually been the caregiver for a very, very long time. This is before on demand because they're cobbling work together, and most families are in need of 24/7 support when it comes to senior care. So the caregiver has been as part of the gig economy for a very long time. At care.com, we have 7 million caregivers in the US in our platform.
7 million?
7 million.
Wow.
7 million caregivers. Of the jobs that are posted on Care, 70% are part-time jobs, under 30 hours. They're just trying to make ends meet, which is one of the reasons we wanted to make sure that any job that is posted is above minimum wage on care.com. So we're at the junction of this supply side and this demand side when it comes to care. And we see it. And guess what the size of this industry alone is in the United States between childcare and senior care? $280 billion. It's as large as the legal industry, and we know we're litigious. A lot of lawyers here, I know, right? Very large industry, and it is an economic imperative. And if you ever wonder whether it pertains to you because you're not a caregiver yourself, how many of you have children? How many of you have nieces and nephews? How many of you have been children? So guess what? Your home will be a workplace. Let me repeat that again. Your home will be a workplace. It's going to matter a lot how we think about the gig workers or the flex workers, because we ourselves are going to need them and employ them in terms of caregivers. So Senator Warner talked about shared responsibility. Secretary Perez talked about principles. What does that mean in terms of leaders, business leaders, and how do I think about it? So for a long time now, and I think about long term, we've been focused on 3 things. One, in terms of product. We invested in a company and bought a company called Breedlove and Associates and rebranded it HomePay. We are helping families to become compliant and to employ caregivers, provide them Social Security and unemployment insurance, and we've been doing this now for over 3 years. We just added workers' comp, and it is now available for all 50 states for our caregivers. And we will soon be launching a portal. Soon we will announce other benefits that we provide access for families to provide their caregivers. And there's a lot to provide for. That's on our own platform, there's 7 million. But we believe there's over 20 million caregivers, 25 million in this country alone. So there's the product side. Then we think about overall policy. I'm very proud to work very closely with the National Domestic Workers Alliance. We've been supporting for the past few years the passing of the Domestic Workers Bill of Rights in 6 states. We launched the Fair Care Pledge. That's fair pay, clear expectation, and overall paid leave for caregivers. And we announced that at CGI. We're also now supporting the Good Work Code, and Pollux here in the audience is one of the co-founders of the Good Work Code. We work closely with Anne-Marie Slaughter with New America to focus on data, and that's what Aspen's all about. I'm also a Henry Crown Fellow with the Aspen Institute. Proud to say that I've been in connection with Elliot and Maureen for a number of months now, and thrilled to see the future of work becoming a reality, because it's something that I believe that the dialogue needs to happen. So that's policy. Third, awareness. We must invest together as a coalition in awareness. I'm working now with Jeremy Hymans at purpose.org and NDWA, Carrying Across the Generations. And if you are funders and you are interested in helping us professionalize caregivers and improve the overall vision we have for the flex economy, please join us in developing an awareness campaign, especially for this year, where it's going to matter a lot, and we put it on the map overall. So we have to focus on these things to be competitive, as Byron pointed out. This is where the future is going. If we do not invest in a care infrastructure, and Anne-Marie Slaughter has been known to say this, we invest in roads and bridges, but we've got to invest in care and our people. And that is what the future of work is all about. If you don't have that support overall, to be overall competitive for the future.
So Saket In your case, guest workers aren't new, but the world of guest workers are changing. Tell us more about it.
Sure. Well, my name is Saket Soni. I run the National Guest Worker Alliance, and we are a national low-wage contingent worker association. We represent many of the workers who have always been gig workers. Perhaps most emblematically, after Hurricane Katrina hit Louisiana Gulf Coast and the levees we breached, we represented the day laborers who stood on street corners and rebuilt an American city. Today, technology is able to have anyone, anywhere enter the labor market and be a casual day laborer without having to stand on that day labor corner. Uber and other platforms are nothing more than that kind of opening up of a labor market, which you previously had to reach physically and now can reach at the touch of your phone screen. And this is not a bad thing. Innovation and technology are good, and I think the people on this stage, on my right and left, because they run these companies, they know how much these companies are a driver of innovation and change. They know how much the economy is changing. My members know how much it matters when you're swinging from trapeze to trapeze, from the old economy to the new economy, to have that safety net under you when you fall. You could either fall and catapult back into the next job, or you could fall to a certain death because of the extraordinary difference between the winners and the losers in today's economy. I mean, the fact is that we are undergoing now, there are huge debates about the numbers. The debates between the various versions of how many contingent workers there are in this economy is the DC Economist's version of a blood feud. Future of work meetings across the country end with scarred economists walking out after debates about the numbers. Is it 1 million or 50 million? But I can tell you that we are experiencing the transition of a generation. We're experiencing a once in 40-year economic transition. Others have talked about it. And the question is going to be whether we invest in our ability to be resilient during that transition. Or will that transition be marked with opportunity for some, but pain and poverty for many? And that's where the new social compact and the concept of portability comes in. The fact is that in the future we will have more workers who have more occupations per lifetime and more jobs per year. And that's why you need a system of benefits that moves with you from job to job, that is portable, that is prorated, and that's universal. And it's not a new idea. Construction workers, musicians, actors, many in our economy have had it. But I think what is new in its formulation, as David in the audience and others have formulated, is that a previously marginal and perhaps experimental idea, a jazz club song is now a stadium hit. I mean, we are talking about a group of workers who were previously thought of as marginal, becoming the emerging working majority in this country, and therefore the needs that they have are now majoritarian needs. And I think that's why the particular timeliness of the portable benefits conversation. Portable benefits are a piece of the puzzle, but an incredibly important piece of the puzzle. And I can speak for my members and other workers. Look, gig economy workers are not somehow separate and away from and a whole other species than the workers that we all know. They are the workers that we all know. I know a fireman who is a union fireman in New Orleans, whose pension is being eroded in a debt swap, who has a second job as a subcontracted EMT, and a third job as an Uber driver. The fact is, people are stretched across the old economy and the new one. People are stretched across the physical day labor corner and the day labor platform. And And the social compact has to stretch to adequately support their needs as we change the way that we work. I think that's why portability is so important. I think the blood feuds aside and the debates over numbers aside, I think the source of optimism here is how many different rooms are having this conversation. A number of us signed on to a letter with a number of companies because there's, on the way to the 2016 elections, where there's very little consensus to be had in some places, a lot of consensus around the new needs of workers. Many companies have signed on to the Good Work Code that National Domestic Workers Alliance is pioneering. Peers and Shelby Clark is in the room, is already innovating a platform and the product that many can then use. So there's innovation going on. There are glimpses into the future. Since the Secretary quoted Bob Dylan, Bob Dylan also said, "He who isn't busy being born is busy dying." And I'd much rather spend the next 25 years being born than busy dying. I think this is a moment of upswing in terms of boldness and creativity, not a moment of decline in terms of the economy.
So Oisin, I can just tell from your youth and what you've done already that you're still being born.
That's an intro.
But Handy sure looks pretty full grown. What's your experience with it?
So we started Handy 3 years ago with the view that the way people buy services is broken. So you think you need a home cleaner, a handyman, a plumber, an electrician, a carpenter, and it's such a broken buying experience. You go and you look for referral from family members or friends, you look to neighbors, you look online, you look at classifieds, you try and type some stuff in and you hope that people will contact you. The shocking thing is that exactly the same thing is happening for sellers. So we don't think about it because we're busy trying to find a plumber or a handyman. Sellers are on the other side of this, so there are great handymen, great plumbers, great cleaners, great carpenters going through the reverse experience, where they're trying to figure out where they should advertise, whether they should buy leads, who they should buy leads from, whether they should trust the phone calls that are coming in. And that friction, trying to solve that problem, is what Handy is all about. So today you go to handy.com or you go to the Handy mobile app, you press a button, you say, I need a cleaner tomorrow at 9 a.m. The opposite side of it is the cleaner's just seeing a list of jobs come through with a confirmed price that says tomorrow at 9 a.m. there's a 3-hour job. You press a button, you claim the job, you know if you show up, you'll get paid. Today we have over 10,000 people every single week. So we've had over 750,000 people apply to join the platform, but every week we've 10,000 people out doing work on the platform, serving over 1 million bookings at this point. And part of the challenge that we've faced is how can we help preserve what those folks have while giving them more? So today, I think there's been a lot of conversation around flexibility. It's obvious that they have immense flexibility. They can claim whatever job they want. Once they've gone through a rigorous background check and vetting process, they can claim whatever job they want on the platform. They never give us a schedule, they never give us availability, they never give us a calendar. They just claim whatever job they want. And I think you've heard Senator Warner talk about how difficult it is to put a value on that flexibility, but it's so valuable. That's not enough, though. I think we understand that we want to offer our folks more. So today there's this frustration where after millions and millions of data points, we know what makes customers happier. We can't tell our pros what to do. We can't explain to them. We can't say, hey, we could put you on this education program or a training program that would actually help you, not just on Handy, but whenever you serve any customer ever, we can help you be better at what you're doing every single day. And we can't offer that training in the current environment. Similarly, we've got an idea about how to give folks access to benefits that we can't bring to the platform today because it would trigger this classification challenge. I think all these platforms, you look across the biggest 4 platforms from Handy to Uber to Lyft to Instacart, they've got over 400,000 people working on these platforms every week. None of them are more than 6 years old. That's both good and terrifying all at the same time. But what it definitely means is that we don't know what the answer looks like. So there's no way after 6 years we know exactly how to regulate or how to legislate towards the solution. And I think Senator Warner had this concept of how do we create the space to get towards the answer? How do we create a safe harbor so that we can offer access to benefits, access to education and training without triggering an additional liability. I think there were points made earlier around how there are millennials, who deeply, deeply want to do the right thing and who want to work at mission-driven companies. I think all of these platforms want to deliver a great experience to customers and deliver a great earning experience to professionals. I think we just need a little bit of space to be able to figure out what the answer is so that we can have this debate around, where do we draw the line and what the right solution looks like.
So what I want to do to close this out is actually I want to key off where you just finished, Oisin, and bring it back to the other panelists to comment on this too. Because Oisin, first of all, was stressing that although you often hear about, robots taking people's jobs, technology is a threat to workers, all of these panelists are talking about the ways technology is creating opportunities. But Oisin's pointing out is that the benefits institutions don't fit, and also he has trouble helping his workers take full advantage of these opportunities because the traditional training infrastructure and other things isn't there. So that, for example, this issue of how do you invest in workers in these models? If you treat workers as assets, as Byron said, how do you invest in workers using this sort of model, which Oisin teed up? Saket and Sheila and Byron, starting with you, Saket, is this something you've thought about?
Yes, very much. I mean, the key to it is that even though the era of full-time, long-term, predictable employment that is bundled with benefits may be coming to an end, it is still possible to create an experience of rationality and continuity from job to job that offers workers the same sense of life journey as going to work every day for a long time. The construction industry and other industries have done it. And that gets at fundamentally what's valuable about work. It is a source of income, but it's also a source of development, continuity, and a sense that the work is leading to your personal development and you are contributing back into society. Work structures our relationship to people around us in a major way. And I think you can construct benefits and schedules in a way that creates that arc of development for workers. It's particularly important. Look, the New Deal that we've talked about all day, the same decade as that New Deal was innovated, in the Bell Telephone Labs, that was the time when the induction coil was placed inside the bottom of the phone, leaving people to produce to dial the ringer independently. If this doesn't mean anything to you, it's for a very good reason, which is that innovation and necessity moved so much past that model, but we have not rewired our social contract to the economic model at the same pace.
Sheila, how are you grappling with the problem of how you invest in improving your workforce?
It's interesting. I just met with a really dear friend who's an advisor and asked me, how is it that you're partnering with the NDWA? Aren't you threatened that the unions would, why is this your vision? And we've been working with the NDWA now for several years. And in fact, we had the vision earlier on to say we have to represent the millions of caregivers that are coming onto our platform in numerous ways, in an authentic way, in leadership to make an influence in the industry, as well as investing in the product that I talked about. Right now, we're in conversations with Shelby at Perez, Noah at Stride. There are some terrific products coming out there for companies to integrate and figure out ways in which you're providing more benefits to your marketplace. And I do think that there are challenges to that, but I think that I'm maybe optimistic that people are seeing, just like the audience here. This is what I said to Avra Siegel, who just came from the White House and joined Care.com. I said, these are our peeps. Right? This is the starting point of an organization of all people collating to come together to solve these problems, because we must. Because if we're too afraid to face the W-2 and the 1099s and not getting to the forefront and just going ahead and experimenting and saying, we just have to do it. That we're in conversations now with the Secretary of Labor and Senator Warner, and real conversation is saying, creating a positive platform through the coalition to set examples to say, let's go ahead and represent them, come hell or high water, because that is what we're going to have to do. We have to think in the long term, in the visionary of where we're going to go with all of this. So I think, are there challenges on the business side? Are there challenges on the profitability side and the fear of regulation? Absolutely. But from a business model perspective, and I think Uber, Lyft, and I'm sure Handy's doing it too, is how do you strategize for the future knowing that we will be faced with these challenges? Because who are providing for these workers? Because we get the benefit that we get these high quality workers coming to our platform that we in turn benefit by offering them to families, and we get profitable that way. So we've got to figure out a way to solve a solution that is a win-win for all stakeholders, as we pointed out here.
Byron, you've had a chance to think about this from multiple perspectives over the last few years. How do you see this problem of lifting the workforce?
Yeah, well, I mean, I do think that you hear a lot these days about sort of technology killing people's jobs and whatnot, and I really don't. I think technology is not our problem. Incentives, that's a problem. Our business models are a problem. Our institutions more generally are a problem. We've had 250 years of technology automating work, raising labor productivity and so forth without jobs in the aggregate disappearing. And in fact, on the whole, incomes are rising because individuals can accomplish more, they can deliver more value. And so it's really not the technology, unless you think that we've run out of problems to solve, unless you think that everything's hunky-dory and what else could anyone ever do to make anyone's life better, then technology is absolutely not the problem. And in fact, technology, I think if we get the institutions and the incentives right, there are enormous ways where technology can be used to accelerate learning and actually to make that learning relevant throughout someone's lifetime and sort of much more faster path to sort of better jobs and better opportunities, the ability to sort of signal one's skills, the ability to match talent to task. And Opportunity at Work is working primarily now with information technology jobs, which are actually a very broad range, and many of them can be trained quite quickly. And there you see the institutions of, as you say, hiring. You need to be able to, if someone can do the job, they ought to be able to get the job. They can hire, and then access to training. But it's not just in information technology. So, for example, as I think about caregivers, just to take one small thread among many, cognitive behavioral therapy, right? The ability to interact with those you are caring for in a way that increases their agency, their optimism, is absolutely shown to reduce mortality, morbidity. It creates genuine value. It makes people's lives better. There's every reason why it would be more valuable for the world, and if as many of the caregivers on your platform and beyond were trained in those skills and use them in a daily way. So what stops that from happening, right? It's not technology. In fact, technology would be an incredibly valuable tool. There is technology now to start to train people on these techniques. But Care.com, which sees far more of this field, would be a natural place to go for those skills. But if Care.com can't train people without upending its business model, then that's a problem. It goes beyond that. If, in fact, more than half of this caregiving ultimately is paid for by the public sector, and the public sector caps, pricing just in terms of time and hours, and therefore you actually can't get higher returns for delivering higher value through this training, well then, by definition, we've created a structure in which a race to the bottom is almost guaranteed, because that's we've advantaged. We put our thumb on the scale in favor of sort of a race to the bottom business model. And I think this is something I think that everyone ought to understand. It's not that we're trying to create this tremendous advantage for kind of worker-friendly models or models that invest in people. Many parts of our tax code, of our regulatory system, of the way the government pays for services, of our accounting system, actually puts the thumb on the scale, or a heavy weight on the scale, in favor of automation, in favor of lower wages and the like. And actually, if we could get to a level playing field, that's absolutely where we want to be. And if we get to a level playing field with a relatively simple and clear set of standards, I think we'll see a tremendous amount of innovation that will surprise us on the upside and the opportunity it creates.
That's a great closing thought, Byron, because you have a tax code that treats capital equipment, hardware, as an asset, and you have an accounting system that treats workers and investing in workers as costs. And you incentivize people to invest in, quote, assets and to disinvest in so-called costs. And it's a profound thought. This panel has given you, I think, a pretty good depiction of the landscape out there and the kind of issues people are facing, and some of the narratives that can help shape a solution. One of the conclusions we've drawn in our work, actually, as we think about this historically, is that Americans tend to think of, well, there are government solutions and there are business solutions. But if you actually examine the history of the American education system, our road and highway system, our electric utility system, our telecommunications system, in other words, our medical care system, all the great institutions of our life, they are built by private-public partnerships with unglamorous histories that few people understand, but were the product of creative choices, many of them made generations ago. The key takeaway then is it's this generation's turn to make new creative choices, to create new kinds of private-public partnerships that, for example, can provide the kind of training we already have partnerships to provide in advanced manufacturing, but could be adapted with new sorts of designs for all the kinds of things you've been hearing about today. So it's a commanding agenda. It's very challenging. A lot of people here are working on it, but it's never been more possible than it is now to imagine that future and still keep being born. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks.